Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Capital Edge Tip Line. I'm Chad Braley at Capital Edge, and happy to be back with you all. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about DCAA's FY24 report to Congress, which I find insightful, interesting, and we're going to kind of dive into this a little bit and give you some of the highlights and the details, which I also think impacts how where we should expect, continued audit focus areas, which they obviously speak to in this, but, also assessing how the agency is evaluating risk. So some of the key highlights: just under $600 billion in contract cost examined, which they claim is the largest volume in 5 years that they've been doing that. $5.9 billion in audit exceptions identified, which equates to about 2.7% of the total cost examined. $5.1 billion in net savings delivered to the taxpayer, and $7.20 an hour ROI for every audit dollar invested, which they talk about as a notable efficiency improvement over prior years. I'm going to get to that statistic because it gets a little bit interesting as we go into some of their quote unquote projections of net savings related to some of the audits. So bear with me, we'll get back to that. Overall, from an audit workload and performance perspective, 3,558 incurred cost submissions, only 530 audit reports, which equates to 9.8%. On the flip side, you've got forward pricing, where there were approximately about 750-ish forward pricing reviews, 649 audit reports, which is 87%. So 87% of forward pricing rate submissions were audited. Then we get into business systems, cost accounting standards, Truth in Negotiations Act, or truthful cost and pricing data audits. 12.8% of the total submissions and reviews actually resulted in an audit report. That means 515 audit reports and 3,490 memos that are issued. And then on the claims and termination side, it was just under 50% that resulted in actual audit reports. So I kind of find that interesting from a standpoint of, you can read that math, right? We're basically going to audit every forward pricing rate submission and give you a report. Many of these others, much lower percentages of review and issuing memos, but we also don't know if that's just a memo based on, I was doing a business system review and I identified a potential CAS issue, so I issued a memo on that. So kind of interesting how the numbers play out, but I think what everybody's probably more interested in are the dollars examined and the audit exceptions. So from an audit exception perspective, if you think about incurred cost submissions, less than 1% of all the dollars examined resulted in an audit exception. Now, you might be asking, what are the sustainment rates, Chad? Well, I'm going to get to that in just a little bit. On the forward pricing side, 7.4% of the total cost examined was questioned, by far the highest percentage of any of the audits. On the business systems CAS and TINA side, 2.1% audit exceptions versus dollars examined. And on the claims and terminations, actually this came in second with 4% of total exceptions as it relates to dollars examined. Now, what's very interesting to me is a term, and I had to kind of write this down too, because it's not clear in the report. So we go back to the business systems, CAS and TINA, right? They issued audit reports on 12.8% of the total population of reviews that were performed. They questioned 2.1, or had audit exceptions, if you will, 2.1% of the cost in 2024. However, they have projected cost savings and audit exceptions based on and this is the actual term from the report, the monetization of estimates for business systems and CAS audits. So I'm not really sure how they monetized that in terms of looking at a system, because we've all seen system reports that identify, in the past significant deficiencies. Now they're called material weaknesses. That didn't actually result in a lot of dollars, right? It was a procedural thing. It was a process thing. So I'm not sure how the agency is necessarily monetizing those overall projections. And that monetization, right, takes the business systems CAS and TINA audits, when they talk about net savings and ROI, right, the return on investment for the audit cost, to 11.3 based on that monetization. Right? On the claims and termination side, the ROI was 2. On the forward pricing side, it was by far the highest, and we also talked about also the highest number of actual audit reports. 87% of the total population resulted in audit reports. ROI on forward pricing 11.7, ROI on incurred costs 3.5. But by monetizing the estimates for business systems and CAS audits and coming up with an 11.3 ROI, that brings the overall blend of the combination of quote unquote net savings as determined by the agency compared to the audit cost of performing those audits to 7.2 overall ROI, which I mentioned earlier in the discussion, the highest by far over the years. But I think there needs to be a little bit of an asterisk there in terms of actual net savings, because we're projecting net savings based on, I'm not sure.